I'm now going to turn it over to our guest speaker, who is Jennifer Jorgensen. She is the Director of Government Affairs for the City of Sarasota. And she's also brought with her Jim Wormley, who is the Special Events Manager. So the format is going to be Jennifer's going to give a quick presentation. We're going to open it up to questions from the board. And then once we've moved on with that, we will see if you guys have any other questions for her.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll hold it and then pass it to you. Jim's going to do the majority of the heavy lifting today, but thank you for having us today. Really appreciate it. Today we wanted to talk through, I know, a topic that has been very important to a lot of people, which are the special events ordinance changes that we've been working on for 3-4 years. I've been at the city for about 3 years, and I know they started it before I was there, and we are hoping to get this wrapped up very soon. Just a little bit of background, we've been working on the ordinance changes, like I said, for a while. Back in April, we did a city commission workshop where we went through proposed changes at that time with the city commissioners. From that commission workshop, we did receive some feedback from the community. We took some of that feedback into consideration, made some changes to the ordinance, and then we held a public input session late August of last year, where again, we rolled out what our proposed changes were to the special event ordinances at that time. I also came and spoke to this group and talked about some of those changes at that time. Again, since that public input session, we have taken additional feedback from the community and made some additional changes to the special event ordinance, proposed changes. And that is what we are going to focus on today, is kind of what those new updated proposed changes are, taking that feedback into consideration. Then we'll, like I said, open it up to questions. We can answer any questions that you have to give you a little bit of an idea of what the next steps are. With these new proposed changes that we're going to talk about today, please know we have not shared these with our city attorney yet. So the next step is to send those to our city attorney. We have obviously a new city interim city manager as well. I've had discussions with him about what we're trying to do with the special event ordinances, but we have not shown him those changes either. So Jim and I have a meeting with him next week to go through all those changes. Once we have those changes into the city attorney's office and the city manager's office, we will take any feedback that they have. If there's changes that they are requesting, we'll make those changes. But our goal is to have this to our city commissioners, hopefully August, no later than September, so we can look at doing a first reading of those proposed changes with the city commission this fall. So that's kind of our timeline, which we've had to revise quite a bit, so I apologize for that. But just again, wanted to give you an idea of where we're at with what we're proposing. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim. And again, Jim's going to walk through some of the proposed changes that we have had since the public input session that we did back in August.
Thank you. Again, my name is Jim Wormley. I'm the Special Events Manager. I've been here with the city going on about 4 years. My background is I came from Sarasota County Parks and Recreation. I had worked there for 23.5 years. My last position there was the Recreation Manager. So I oversaw quite a few facilities and parks from anywhere from University Park all the way down to Inglewood. So quite the area there. So we actually did the programming or had other people, third parties come in and rent facility space or open space. Here it's a little bit different. Since I moved over here, I'm on the other side. People are coming to us. So we, this Office of Special Events, do not run the events that we're talking about. So I think sometimes it gets confused, like we're actually putting them on, we're not. People come to us, they apply for the event, and they go through a process. So there's a process, and I just want to talk about this to give you guys some backgrounds on how this works. But you apply for an event in the city, and we need a site map and application. And since I've been there, we've made a lot of changes in the last 4 years just on how the process goes, because there's some people that have never run events before that want to run events for the city. And our job is to basically make sure they follow the ordinance, make sure they're safe. You know, fun is a subjective, types or quality of events is subjective as well. So we don't determine who comes in here and does this. You know, it's just we get the application, make sure they're okay. So once we get the application, it goes through what we call a departmental review process. So depending on the location of the event within the city, multiple departments will take a look at the application and the site map, make sure they're okay with it. So for example, if it's in the park, Parks and Recreation will take a look at it. If there's a street closure, or if there's some other city services, Public Works will take a look at it. Of course, Risk Management looks at it. All of our events require Sarasota Police Department to look at it to see what kind of resources need from there. And then once we get the okays from all the appropriate departments for that particular event, we give the final approval on it, but we need all the yeses first before we give the final yes. So we're not just taking event applications and saying, yes, go have your event. So it goes through quite the process. Typically, we try to do it at least 90 days in advance. And, we're encouraging folks to do this, 6 months in advance. And that's going to be a change because it takes some time to go through this. And sometimes there's changes, people want to make adjustments. And if once you make an adjustment, we have to stop the process, kind of start it all over again, because if they make changes, everybody has to review those changes again. So it could take some time, but the majority of the events that happen within the city are pretty much repeat events that have been happening for years and years and years. And then we'll have the one-offs that come in and go. So typically we get about 100 applications or more per year. We have about anywhere from 85 to 90-ish events that actually occur within the city limits over the course of the year. But that's all over the city. They're not in just one place. So it could be at Payne Park, could be on Main Street, could be at Ken Thompson Park, St. Armand's, the Bay. There's a whole bunch of locations. So, and each one of those, again, requires a little different view or a review of the application. So just want to kind of give you that background and let you again, we don't actually run the events, and it's the organizer. So we can't determine who can or can't come and apply for an event. That's one thing here. Everything's so we can control who it is. And I think some folks think that certain people shouldn't be, but that's not our job to determine that. We just get the application, make sure they follow this current city ordinances. And so since I've been here, we've taken feedback from residents, businesses, staff, just to try to make this better. And this is kind of what we've come up with, some of these changes. And, again, it's never going to be a perfect situation for everybody. We can't make everybody happy, but I think as we go along here, we try, and even as we've been going along here, we've been encouraging, one of our mottos is within our department is, be a good neighbor. So when these event organizers come here and say, hey, just keep in mind, this is what's going on here. And, for the events, we allow up to 100 decibels if there's music involved. However, we've been encouraging at this point in time, and we don't have to, but and they don't have to comply. They can go up to 100 because that's what the current sound permit allows. But we are encouraging 90 decibels right now, which is a big difference. And then we're going to, as you'll see, recommend 85 when the changes come. So 85 could be just normal traffic driving downtown if you've ever taken a decibel reader and stuff. So we're trying to make some changes to understand and help offset some of the complaints that we get with regards to sound levels. And certain places, the sound bounces off of buildings a little bit differently, so it sounds louder than it actually is. So there's that problem, but there's also, you got to remember, whoever makes a complaint. So we get the complaints from residents. So if somebody makes a complaint from their resident or the residents, they have to call SPD and make a formal complaint. SPD will come to your resident and residents, and they have to do their process to measure the sound from inside the residence. So it's not because it's loud on the street and you don't like the type of music or how loud it is or whatever. It's from your residence. So we offered it one point in time to put it out there to everybody. Hey, just let us know. We'll come to your place and kind of see what you're observing. And because we heard a lot of these horror stories of how the room is shaking and I got to hide in my closet and those kinds of things. And so funny enough, we got into a residence over Lower Main, which was right over the top of one of the bigger events. And louder events that we have, and the noise levels did not exceed or weren't even close to the numbers. So windows open, windows closed, so both. So they did not exceed. So you can remember where you make the complaint from is where they're going to take the measurement. So what we're also proposing to do is take measurements 100 feet from the source of the sound and make that consistent. And we take test measurements all the time. So we have equipment, but our equipment it's pretty good, but it's not certified. It's SPD that has certified equipment, and they have certified people who run that equipment. And they have to run it a certain way, but we can get a good idea. And if we have a special events monitor, his name's Sam Jarris, and he attends all the events. I go to the majority of the events. And, if there's a problem, we go immediately to the organizer. I know, hey, can you tone that down a little bit or whatever? And most of the time they comply and stuff, so we don't have an issue. But we're going to propose to take that 100, from 100 feet away to make sure they're staying within the proposed, hopefully 85 decibel range in the future and stuff. So that's kind of where we are with it. So I just want to kind of get that out of the way and let you guys know, and hopefully that will ease some of your concerns about some of these events, because again, we don't control who comes in, the types of events and whatnot and stuff. However, we are going to propose some restrictions in certain areas, like the downtown core, just keeping in mind, how it affects the businesses, how it affects the residents and whatnot. And then, for certain other areas outside the downtown core, like Payne Park or the Bay, that the sound ordinance, because it's a bigger area, that you can still have the noise level or the sound permit up to 100 because it's just a bigger area and stuff. So that's it from my introduction from a special event standpoint. And want me to just go down this list, or yeah? So we made some. I don't know if can you still hear me fine?
Yeah, all good.
Okay. So yesterday, I don't know if you watched or not, we were at the DID meeting, and these are some of the additional changes that we're proposing to have with the sound ordinance. And again, like Jen said, these have not been seen or approved by city attorney or city manager. And again, we're going to have some one-on-ones with commissioners and whatnot, but we appreciate everybody's feedback. And, we're trying to get this through. And I think we've done a good job of trying to, again, meet everybody's concerns and come to somewhat of a happy medium to make everybody, okay with it. Again, we're not going to be perfect on this, but we're doing the best we can by taking everybody's feedback. So since we proposed the ordinance back and the changes back in August of last year, here's some of the bullet points that I'll go over. One is the applicant of the special event permit has not within the last 2 years been found in violation of a city ordinance. So that means, if they haven't violated, we're not talking parking tickets or something like that, but if they're in violation, then we'll do a special event. So there are certain things that we can immediately tell people they can't have an event, and that's in the ordinance. And if it's not in there, then we can't, tell them one way or the other. So we're trying to clear up some of the grayness in the ordinance. Additional restriction would be from Main Street to Orange Avenue, on Main Street, I'm sorry, from Orange Avenue to Gulfstream, no more than one special event permit per month. No special event permit will be issued for events on consecutive weeks or weekends in the downtown core. Downtown core restrictions for special event permits that include a sound permit and a temporary alcohol permit. So the Office of Special Events shall not issue a special event permit for special events occurring on consecutive weekends. Office of Special Events shall not issue more than 2 special event permits per month. And this is in the downtown core. Any special event permit that includes a right-of-way closure shall not exceed 1 day. So some of these block parties, street parties and stuff will not be more than 1 day. So it won't be a Saturday, Sunday, or kind of a Friday. Yeah. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, or whatever it is and stuff. So, but either way, we're trying to put this in here to eliminate concerns of some of the resident businesses that are out there. No special event activity excluding tear down shall take place after 11 p.m. With the exception of the New Year's Eve celebrations. That's the city co-sponsored event, the Pineapple Drop. The restrictions above do not apply to city co-sponsored events. So we have a list of 15 city co-sponsored events on a resolution. Even though there's 15, there's only about 12 of them that are done right now. 3 of them haven't happened in several years, and we're looking to review that or reassess that and change the number, and then also add the Fresh Fridays events to that, because that's treated like a special event or a city co-sponsored event. No special event permit will be issued for events at Bobby Jones Golf Club, except for events organized by the manager of the golf course. And then going back to the sound permit changes. Sound is not to exceed 85 decibels during the approved event time, with the exception of Bay Park, Bayfront Park, Payne Park, and Ken Thompson Park. Sound will be measured from 100 feet from the source.
And just one thing I want to clarify that Jim said is for the restrictions, the new restrictions in downtown core. And those new restrictions are no consecutive week or weekends, no more than 2 events per month. And also the right-of-way, if it's a right-of-way closure, not more than 1 day. I just want to clarify that those 3 things only apply to special events that have both a temporary alcohol permit and a sound violation. So what we don't want to do is, if there's an art festival, you know, that's there, and again, we don't have problems with, you know, those type of block parties or late night sounds with the art fairs. We don't want to restrict those kind of events. So you could have an art fair one weekend and then a block party type event that has a sound permit and a temporary alcohol permit the next weekend. So I just want to clarify that those 3 restrictions are only on the events that have the temporary alcohol permit and the sound permit.
I think it's excluding Fresh Friday, because that would tie up most of the year.
Well,
Or half of the year.
So that is one thing. Is right now, Fresh Fridays, though, the fees for Fresh Fridays are waived per city commission approval. They aren't listed as a city co-sponsored resolution. We will be bringing the resolution to city commission this fall for them to again reapprove the city co-sponsored events. And at that time, we can have that conversation of how many should be on there, you know, with the city commissioners, you know, how many, if Fresh Fridays is going to be on there, how many how many of those should be on there. So those are all conversations that we'll definitely have.
So that's been pretty successful.
At that time. Yes, and right now, the way the ordinance is written is, again, any city co-sponsored event would not have to follow these requirements. So again, you could have an event that isn't city co-sponsored on one weekend. The very next weekend, then you could have an event that is city co-sponsored. So you could have back-to-back, because the city co-sponsored wouldn't have to comply with these restrictions.
So why is that your proposal going forward? Why could you not combine them so that the affected parties, regardless of who's sponsoring it, are not affected more than once every 2 weeks, which is proposed would be 3 weekends straight in a row of parties, closures, which is not what residents want to see. So
those are definitely conversations that we will have with, you know, city leadership and the city commission. The city co-sponsored events are events, again, that is something that is supported by the city, not necessarily an event that is organized by the city, as Jim said, but those are typically events that are parades. You know, they aren't always the block parties, but Fresh Fridays does fall into that category. And so those are, again, conversations that we would have with city commission at that time. We do want to encourage events, obviously, in the downtown area. We feel some of the limitations that we are putting on them, such as closing at 11, those apply to all special events. So city co-sponsored would still have to apply, would have to comply with those kind of requirements. It really is just the consecutive weekends and the more than 1 day block party. But I think another good conversation to have then is, what is the right number of city co-sponsored events that the city should have via resolution? Because then that would, you know, also be something to look at when these don't have to comply with those requirements. If there's a smaller number, if there's a very large number of city co-sponsored, then it's probably a good conversation to have if maybe those should have to comply with these restrictions. So those are all things we're still continuing to have conversations with city leadership on. These are just our recommended proposals. based on the number of events that we have currently, and based on the type of events that we have currently.
So if I could add just one thing quickly to that is that remember a lot of these events that I think a lot of the residents have, or some of the residents have concerns with, happen during season. It's a condensed period of time when they happen, because like, basically from May until October, it's pretty light. We don't hear much, and there's not too many of these things. Fresh Friday's just wrapped up their June one. They're not going to start until October. We don't really have any block parties. The one for July 4th that was scheduled was canceled. So we don't really have those type of events that are happening for about 6 or 7 months of the year. So it just seems like a lot more, maybe because it's in a condensed time frame. But a lot of them are, if you take by sections, there's only a few per year there, and I get it. I get both sides of it and stuff, but just want to let you know, it just seems probably a little bit more magnified, because it makes sense, from an organizer standpoint, that I'm going to take advantage of when more people are here.
That's why people are here. They want to do stuff.
Correct.
Too. So.
So it sounds like you guys had feedback from residents. How did the people on the other side? Have you guys had any feedback from those who have special events? What was their feedback on this, on your proposals? If you've had any?
Everybody was invited. So we had organizers, and, again, we talked to everybody consistently, and we tried to keep them in the loop and say, hey, this is the direction that we're looking at going. And, they might say, hey, well, did you think about this? Same thing like we would take with the resident, like think about the impacts, look at the bigger picture and whatnot. And again, I think we've done a good job of balancing, feedback from all residents and all businesses that are involved. We've heard things like, some businesses shouldn't have a say in it because they're not open after 5 o'clock. But, I would liken that to being a homeowner, and you tell me my vote doesn't count as a homeowner in an HOA situation. And this also provides an opportunity for businesses to be open later, to generate some more revenue if they want. You've heard some people talk about how the revenues are down after the storms and whatnot. Here's another opportunity. I can be open for a couple hours extra longer, have people walk to the store, do some things. And that happens naturally too. I saw the fireworks the other day. Came back, somebody was having an auction from one of their art galleries and stuff out there. They're typically closed at like 4 or 5 o'clock on a daily basis stuff. But here they are open at 8, 9 o'clock, trying to sell some artwork and stuff. So.
There's one thing that and everybody worried about noise and so forth, but I think that one thing, I don't think it's the noise as much as it is the frequency range of the noise. Is there a way of having like 100 hertz cutoff or something? Because I think that's the thing that really irritates people. If you're sitting up in your condo and all you're hearing is boom, 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 boom. That's at 50 hertz. If you were above 100, 125 hertz, then you wouldn't even be hearing that.
Sure. So I think one thing is
that can be written into
we're just waiting for, again, separate of this, there's the sound ordinance talk.
Yeah.
And currently it doesn't really talk about the DDC, which is the base levels that you're referring to. So, but what I know from a special event standpoint, when you have music, so you have your DDA, which is basically your treble, and then the organizer or whoever's doing music typically to make the music sound good goes 10 decibels higher than the DDA. So even if we're at 85, the DDC could be at 95 to give it that thump, so to speak, to that. But we've measured some things. Our equipment can measure the DDC, and we see things upwards of 120 and whatnot, but we can't control that at this point in time. That's a bigger discussion beyond that. But I understand what you're saying.
I think if they can get rid of that, I think you get rid of the lion's share of the complaints.
Could be. But that's a talk, and we in our office try to talk to those folks and say, hey, we'll take your concerns and say, hey, these guys live here. They say they don't want to hear the pumping noise and stuff. Can you at least work with us and turn it down here? Because you have some of these disc jockeys that go out there and they just want to have it as loud as possible. Again, going back to the fireworks the other night, I was telling Jen, we're walking back, and I thought one of the restaurants had a live band, and it was just loud. And what happened was the traffic would stop because everybody's leaving and they can't move. Come to find out, some guy's in his car with some loud equipment in his car. And from a quality standpoint, it sounded fantastic, but it was loud. But he was listening to Mariah Carey, so not so bad. But it was loud. But I assumed that one of the restaurants had something going on, and it was somebody in their car sitting there near the four-way stop at Main and Palm.
Jennifer, Jim, thank you for this. This is, sorry.
And then, Peter had a question
Oh, go
too, so.
ahead.
yeah. Peter?
A two-part question, but they're related. The first is, what's your enforcement mechanism on day of the event? Who enforces that something is not going right?
So again, we get the site map, and that's approved by multiple departments. And so if something's not going right the day of, so we have our special events monitor who goes before, during, and after. And again, I go and check this stuff too, and we monitor, we let people know if they're not working within the approved site plan, then you have to change it or get rid of it and stuff. So we do that from the special events office.
So it comes out of your office?
Correct, but also we might need either, depending on the event, code enforcement or SPD to help us with
Code
certain.
enforcement?
Yeah.
That doesn't work after 5?
Well, I mean, they've helped out with our events. We've asked them, and it's been a change over the last couple of years, and they've helped out. But we've had
Let me ask you
SPD.
about
Yeah.
the ordinance that you're proposing.
Mhm.
Will it have a paragraph in there for enforcement? First offense, you get to second offense, you get a fine. Third, like what we do with the homeless, block the sidewalk once, we move you along. Block the sidewalk twice, and we give you a lecture, etc. Block the line 3 times, and we take you to jail. Are you going to have a section in your events for those kinds of enforcement mechanisms?
So currently, there is already in our ordinance that, that you can be denied a future permit if you did not follow the special event ordinance. So that's already in there. So we have every right to deny a future application that comes through from any event organizers if they have not complied in the past. And we do that. I will say one of the things that we are adding then is if they also get a site violation. So if they get a sound violation, that is what we're adding as a new mechanism as well, is if they have been cited in the last 2 years, then we also have the right to deny that application. So those will be taken into consideration.
That's a good start.
Yeah, and we find some event organizers for certain things, like they did not get the street open as early as they said they would, so they kept it closed for an extra hour or two. So we'll keep a portion of their deposit because of that and stuff, because Public Works can't get in there to clean the streets and whatnot. So I mean, it keeps people on for overtime or the equipment and all this stuff. So that's worked out pretty good because it doesn't happen again after we find them and stuff. And that money goes towards paying the guys overtime and use of the equipment.
Patrick?
Yeah, I got to answer one quick thing. I want to go back to the base really quick. I know that was asked about only because Jim answered it very well in the fact that currently there's a sound ordinance that is separate from the special events. And I know some of those get conflated a little bit. So I want to make it clear that there is a sound ordinance that sets the level of sound for everything within the city limits. The special events has an exception to that sound ordinance. So that's how the special event is kind of related to that sound ordinance, in that the ordinance states for anybody having a special event, you can exceed the levels of sound that are in that sound ordinance if you have an approved sound permit. That is the permit that we're talking about that right now allows the sound to go up to 100 decibels, and we are requesting.
Bob,
If you can do that, then it seems like you could do
So
something
let me-
about.
Yeah,
DVC.
so let me finish really quick. The reason why our sound permit currently doesn't talk about the DVC or the base is because our sound permit has to relate back to how decibels are measured in the sound ordinance. So when the city attorney's office is working on that sound ordinance, if they, in that sound ordinance, go into more detail about how you would measure the dBA versus the DBC, what that then allows us to do is put that into our sound permit. But because that's not necessarily defined and measured in the current ordinance, we can't, unilaterally do that within the sound permit. However, the nice thing about how special events measures their sound is that our levels are not dictated by ordinance. So that means as soon as the sound ordinance is completed by the city attorney's office, all we have to do is update our sound permit to then add that language about the bay. So it gives us a little bit more, you know, leeway to do that. We don't have to do a whole nother ordinance change and come back and do the first and second reading. So we're just waiting for that sound ordinance to be completed, and then we're
You
able to
know,
update
that's
that.
part of what they're going to be modifying.
That is something that Joe and I have definitely been talking about. I can't speak for Joe, and I don't know where they are in the process, but that's definitely something we've been talking about.
And Patrick, no, you had a
Yeah,
question.
just quickly about enforcement, Jim. So you have the special event monitor, you and your team who are out there listening. And then you have SPD, if somebody calls them, they can measure it from wherever the person made the complaint. Then you have code enforcement, who's also available now, it seems, even after 5 p.m. So that means, and there has to have been some violations in the past, if code enforcement and special events monitor, your team finds that they're violating the sound, do they get an ordinance violation such that they are impacted in the future? And more importantly, has SPD ever issued an issue, or has code enforcement or special events ever issued a citation? Ever in the history of Sarasota?
Code enforcement doesn't do the violations for events, so that's totally on SPD. Code enforcement helps us with like unauthorized vendors or, you know, or bars opening up on the streets that aren't part of the event, that are in the footprint trying to sell, make some money. So that's a whole nother thing. So what we're trying to do, and I'll just be honest, is like, you know, I have not seen a violation provided, but I mean, you know, again, it has to go through the process from where the complaint's being made. So we, again, being a little bit more proactive, we're trying to get it to the point where we're taking that measurement 100 feet away and, you know, within there, and that we can not wait for somebody from the public to make a complaint, that we can control the sound by being proactive and stuff. So, and you know, even when you do that, you still have to do it. It's not songs peak and valley. So you're going to go up and down. You might hit, you know, 120 for a second, but you're back down to 85, you know, but you know, if it's over a consistent period of time, you know, and you're violating the, whatever the,
So you have the tools and the
sound
mechanism,
ordinance,
and you know,
Yeah.
violations
So,
aren't going to be the solution
yeah.
to this, avoiding violation.
I mean, I can't say that. I mean, again, this is another talk that we need to have with SPD. And I think they're on board with us, you know, doing these on the event site versus waiting for an actual complaint, because I think most people don't want to go through the process of making a real complaint, because it takes time, and you don't want to go through that and put your name to it. And some people think there's, you know, potential retribution or something happens with that. But I mean, like, currently, that's the only way it can happen right now, is if you make an official complaint, and they would go to the source of the complaint.
One last quick point, and this might be more
Got it.
important to Liz. Peter Bland, one of our board members, did a bunch of research across all the cities, and there's not one city that we can find where the sound ordinance and the special events ordinance aren't like one ordinance. Sarasota is unique in that we have these two ordinances, and that must be a pain for you all, because you're trying to coordinate with this other group, and we can never seem to get consensus on it. Why is it that they're separate in your view, and what can we do to somehow link them together? Wouldn't that make your own lives easier?
Well, I can't answer for the other cities. I have looked at some of the data that, or research that's been done, and I will say if you dig a little bit deeper into those ordinances, they're not as clear as that. For example, we get a lot of questions about the 2/3 sign off for the right of ways, and I would say, everybody says, oh, these other cities don't have that. You're right. They don't even care if somebody signs off on it. We're at least asking for some of those sign offs, which some of these other cities aren't. So what I would say about the sound, when you look at what our sound ordinance is, so I have looked at some of the sound ordinance data that Peter put, one of them, and I can't remember if it was St. Peter, Tampa, they're already at 85 and 87. So ours is at 60, I think 65. I don't have it memorized. So that's, if you go out right now, again, like Jim said, that's ambient noise on the street. So nobody would be able to comply with 60 or 65 if you were doing a special event. Some of these other cities where there is no difference, it's because their typical sound is already at a higher level than ours is. So again, I can't answer across the board for all cities. I haven't done research or looked into the specific ordinances on all of the cities, but some of the bigger ones that we did look at, again, their normal sound ordinance is much higher than ours. So in order to make sure people weren't getting violation after violation when they wanted to have a special event, that's where the sound permit comes up.
Do we have any other board member question, Ken or Clark, before we, Peter, I know you have one more question, and we really need to open it up to anybody else that wants to.
I'd like to ask you a question about another part of your job. How do you come about with a legislative agenda that's supported by the city? And is there an opportunity for the public, like DSCA, to enter into your legislative agenda to give you suggestions?
So I'll say all day long, I'm always open to suggestions. Any help I can get, I'm open to it. I can't always say that it will align with leadership or with city commission, but I would be more than happy to take any legislative suggestions that are out there.
How do you get to that agenda?
So right now, the way that we go through the legislative priorities is I sit down, typically, I'll look at what was important to the legislature in the past, what was important or not important to the governor or our certain officials, what potentially could get passed or not passed, what are other local counties, municipalities around us, and also our Florida League of Cities, which is an organization. I look at all of the interests of those organizations. And again, ours may not always align with those. So just because they're interested in something doesn't mean I necessarily will bring that forward to the city commission as a priority. However, the louder and the stronger we are in advocating for some of these, a little bit better. So if it is something we can align with, or it's something important to us, it's always important to see if somebody who has a little bit louder voices sometimes aligns with that as well. So that's kind of how I started. However, for example, this year, we added arts and culture as something that was part of our legislative priority, and that was not on anybody else's legislative priority. And the reason for that is because obviously the history of Sarasota, arts and culture is very important to them. And the previous year, all of the arts and cultures grants and funding had gotten taken away by the governor. And so that was something for us to start talking about and being strong about as far as arts and culture being important to us. What we saw happening, and I'm not giving, myself or the city credit for doing this, but as we went further and further in the legislative session, some of these individual groups started to get a lot louder, and they actually, some of the legislators talked about putting in more and more legislature for the arts and culture to kind of force the governor to not veto this year, because they were pretty angry. In fact, there was a bill that basically said for all of the items that were vetoed last year, we're going to re-put those in and have those reconsidered. So I like to use that story just because that was something that was important to us, but became important to the overall state as well. Going back to the question about how what we do next or how we formulate them. So I'll just start with kind of what's the history, what's important to our city. I'll put all that together and then I'll bring that to our city leadership, kind of have a discussion with our city leadership, our department directors. I'll bring it to our executive staff meetings, get some ideas from our department directors on the challenges that they're having. And then I'll bring that to the city commissioners. Again, have that conversation in a city commission meeting with the city commissioners. They're great about marking things up, telling me they want to look at something different, prioritizing them, and we go from there. But again, I will absolutely take, suggestions
Great.
from
Thank you
the
very
city
much.
as well. Yeah.
I'm going to open up now to any of our member reps. Anybody else have a question for Jennifer or Jim?
This is Jim Lample from the Jewel.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a suggestion.
You've got a couple minutes, so we got to wrap it up pretty quick.
All right.
Specific parks. Why don't you just say all city parks? That way, as things change, and you don't have to go back and change your orders all the time. That's one. And two, are there monitors that could be put up in the downtown area that measure the sound so that you could have reporting back whenever you have an event that, oh yeah, like we got monitors right now, we're monitoring the air quality by the concrete crushing plant. So isn't there something like that for sound monitoring also that the city could then use to create reporting, and then you wouldn't have to have something going out there that you see the information at the end?
Well, for the sound monitoring, I can't speak to that. I don't know if there's that kind of, and I would say that would probably be something that would be a bigger question for the actual sound ordinance itself. What kind of studies, how to monitor that. I would say just specifically for our special events, because it's such a condensed area and it's also such a condensed time frame, being able to use the calibrated machine machinery that the SPD does at least works for what we're trying to measure at that time. As far as the parks go, the reason why we were specific about some of the parks is if we did all parks, there are some small parks that do sit within residential areas, and we didn't want to affect some of those residential areas with some of our smaller parks, like Selby 5 Points. That's actually a park. There's actually the corner of Lemon and First Street technically is a park. And so again, we didn't want to get ourselves in trouble by saying all parks and then somebody decides to have a big old event there and be able to use 100 decibels. So we just looked at some of the bigger parks. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions from anybody else back there? Oh, Dina?
You may have answered this question in one part,
This is,
but I don't know when you were asked when an event is actually taking place, what is the process the city has of monitoring it? And there was a before, during, and after effort. Now, at any point, well, no, the during, not the before, after, is there actually any effort to at least randomly measure sound that
Yes.
is part of it?
Yeah, so our special events monitor, Sam, will take, and again, we are trying to propose the 100 as the number of feet from there, but he will also go into another area which is closer to a residence place or a business to take it. And so he has different video clips of the decibel readings at those areas, just to give us a better indicator. Like, we'll get a complaint from somebody, we know where they live, and we'll like do a little bit clear. And they say on theirs it's 120, and then we'll get 70, on ours and stuff. So, I mean, like, we do it from multiple places nearby the event.
And so I know you, and I understand why you're waiting for the final reading of the final ordinance, but when you do identify a sound issue during the event, do you have some enforcement at the moment, or you just?
Sure.
I mean, you've talked about fines.
Sure.
And things, but that's after the fact. Is there anything
So-
you can do?
So either if I'm there or if Sam's there, and we find a problem on our own, we will go to the event organizer. So we try to deal with one or two people on site, not necessarily the person that's playing the music, because they're not the ones applying for the
Right, yeah.
event. So you say, hey, can you work with us? We got some readings like this. Can you have them turn it down? And they'll turn it down. And if they don't comply, then we get SPD and they'll come out and they'll kind of force us. And there's been one time where it was closer to the end of the night and they're trying to finish with a big bang. SPD went ahead and pulled the plug because they were just too loud and stuff. So, it was too much. So yeah, we do the best we can within the process that we have right now. Yeah.
All right, guys, I
For
think
Zoom?
we're about out of time.
I-
So thank you for, is anybody online? It's got to be real quick, guys.
Yeah.
One question. We're
Jim
at time.
Lample's online. Jim Lample's online. It
Jim,
was our
Jim,
impression.
Jim, one question.
All right, one question. Are there any new proposals for fairly surveying residents instead of just addresses in the number before getting the permit? As it's set up, every address counts as one. So if you're a condo with 200 residents, that's still one vote. And the eyeglass shop that closes at 5 gets one vote. Any progress on changing that?
At this time, Jim, so I want to be super clear, the 2/3 sign off that Jim is talking about, that only applies if there is a road closure. Some people think that we get that for every special event permit to just even issue the special event permit, and that's not the process. So if there's going to be a road closure or a right-of-way closure for an event, there is a different statute or a different ordinance that sits outside of the special event ordinance. It actually sits in the Public Works City Engineers Ordinance that talks about having, if the event is taking place in less than 72 hours, or if the event in total is less than 72 hours, then the event organizer has to get approval from 2/3 of impacted residents. And impacted residents is defined within that ordinance itself. And we have talked this with the city attorney. The city attorney has done some research where this has actually been discussed at 5 or 6 different city commission meetings over the last 10 years or so. And at this time, we aren't looking to change that the way that it's been stated in the current ordinance and the way that it has been interpreted by the city attorney's office.
All right, thank you guys so much for coming.